Good morning, everyone. I want to say thank you to the program committee for making such a wonderful opportunity available. And I'm honored to be with so many leaders, all of you who are changing the world of networking. My name is Bill Snow. I'm the VP of Engineering at ON.Lab, soon to become Open Network Foundation. You may have heard that the Open Network Foundation and Open Network Lab are merging, and that is in process. It will be happening over the next 6 months to a year. Some of the key messages that I want to give you today, and this talk is in that context. Where is ONF going? How is the merger of ONF and ON.Lab going to manifest itself? So first, the mission of the new ONF is really the same as what it has been for both ONF and ON.Lab. It's to accelerate and increase adoption of SDN and FE. It's to bring standards and open source together. The ONF will continue to bring value and bring even more value to its members and stakeholders. In summary, the new ONF is well positioned to lead the next phase of SDN and FE. We will build on the strengths of the ONF and the ON.Lab. I want to start with some context. The speakers mentioned that we're now 10 years into SDN. There's really 3 phases in my mind. The first phase, from 2006 until 2011. During this time, the Open Network Foundation was formed. During this time, Stanford, Berkeley, and Twin Slate program created the first versions of OpenFlow, picked up by Open Network Foundation. OpenFlow evolved to 1.1 and 1.2 standards. And some very important platforms and tools were created during this period, such as OVS, and Beacon, and Mininet, and the early controllers like DOCS and POPs. And there were actually many others. But this was a time of the origins of OpenFlow, and a time of experimentation and the beginnings of setting the clean slate to move forward. From 2012 until now, I would call it second phase. In this phase, we founded Open Networking Lab as a development organization to pursue open source software, tools, and platforms. From that came 2 important platforms, ONOS, an SDN controller, and Core, a solution for really bringing data center type architectures to central office implementations, both ONOS Foundation projects. The Open Network Foundation continued to evolve OpenFlow through 1.3, which is really the most stable standard now. But there's also versions of 1.4 and 1.5. In addition, the Open Network Foundation started to work in open source, creating a community called OpenSourceSDN.org. A couple of the projects you may be familiar with called Atrium and Spring Open. But during this time, there's a huge number of open source projects started, hardware all across the world. So that's what I would call the second phase. The third phase is where we're headed now. And the merging of the ONF and the ON.Lab is a key part of that. Where we're moving now is integrated solutions such as Core, production deployments, and really taking advantage of the synergy you get with cloud, SDN, and FE. Let's talk about trends. First is disaggregation of networking devices, whether it's switches or routers, or ONOS, or OLTs, or eNodeBs. SDN continues to evolve. Of course, still there is separation of data and control planes. Well, you see an evolution of programmable data planes, such as P4. In the NFV space, we've gone from taking an appliance and making it a virtual server out of it to a much more evolved state of cloud-native, disaggregated functions, microservices, and not just chaining of services, but composition of services, allowing us to virtualize our data plane. Open source projects continue to evolve and multiply from hardware to switch operating systems, to controllers, to BNFs, to displays. Many interesting new technologies, whether they're 5G or Internet of Things, virtual reality. And network operators are at all stages. Some have been operating with SDN for a year, bringing new services. Some, like Google, many more years. And there are still operators standing back watching to see what's going to happen. So this is all impressive, and it's exciting. But there's a lot of confusion and uncertainty. How will the ONF help with that confusion? Our mission is to accelerate and increase the adoption of SDN and NFV, as I've said. And that's to enable operators to transform their networks. Transfer them into an agile platform for service delivery with significantly lower CapEx. My emphasis on agile service delivery, because I think that's the key. The new ONF is well positioned to lead this next phase. ONF has been the standards bearer and leader of the SDN movement. It has 110 member organizations. Of course, it owns the OpenFlow spec and the associated ecosystem around that. And there's a large pool of contributors to the SDN and NFV movement, especially on specs and standards. At ON.Lab, we've been leading in open source SDN and NFV platforms. We have 17 partner organizations and more than 70 collaborator organizations. We have deep engagement with the service providers. We have two open source platforms, ONOS and Core, and very rapidly developing developer community. So ONOF's in a unique position to bring the best of open source standards for agility and interoperability. How are we going to do that? We'll start with some principles. This is what's important. Open source is the key to adoption. Thank you. Up here, it sounds very loud. SDN can be transformative only if there are platforms to build upon. Standards and open source must go together. And there has to be a very collaborative process of developing software which leads to consensus and accelerates the development of specifications. We have to move beyond the proof of concepts and the components that we have to fully integrated solutions with OEM capabilities. And network operators have to be actively engaged and early adopters. That will catalyze the formation of an ecosystem to benefit the entire industry, and also will ensure the relevance of standards. What's the approach we're going to take? First, we're going to create open source SDN and NFV platforms that bring true SDN value proposition to the operators. We're going to build those platforms through use case, proof of concepts, and demonstrate a range of services. We're going to demonstrate the network as a platform for service delivery. We're going to create what we call software-defined standards. And those will be based on working and deployed open source software. We'll create and nurture a vibrant open source and standards community and harness its power to achieve these goals. And we'll leverage the industry developments and work with other ecosystems, and continue disaggregation of networking devices, use of white boxes, and open source. And we'll work with a number of other open source projects, platforms, and standards development organizations. What are the keys to success? First and foremost, that we create deep engagement with the leading network operators. Because they share the requirements, they create the use cases, they're the ones that show a path from a POC to a trial to deployment. The ONF, as ON.Lab does now, will continue to provide architectural shepherding and core engineering. It's vendor neutral. There is no legacy to protect. And it's committed to bringing value to the operators. ONF and network operators form a partnership with the vendors to create disruptive solutions for those operators. And we help vendors and system integrators invent new business models based on white boxes, open source, and the ability to create new and innovative services. ONOS and CORD have been following this approach for the last 5 years with the telco service providers. ON.Lab has been providing architecture shepherding and core engineering for ONOS and CORD. We have deep engagement with 7 leading service provider organizations, and we have 10 key vendors, as well as another 70 companies involved as collaborators. It's a very rich ecosystem. Let's talk about the platforms just a little bit. ONOS, I said, is targeted to work with devices which are disaggregated with white boxes or existing infrastructure. It does that on the control side through OpenFlow or through P4. It does that on the configuration side through netconf and Yang or through OpenConfig. So it's a platform that enables new architectures but also runs very well with existing architectures. On top of that, our goal has been to make it easier to create the control and configuration applications through abstractions like intents. And through those abstractions, it makes it easier for the global orchestrators to be able to interoperate with control. And the ONF focus is on that piece in between the global orchestrators and the hardware. ONOS has been developed through use cases with our operators. The operators define what they want us working on, and we bring the community together to do that. We heard this morning about the packet optical use case. That's a very important one, has been from the beginning. The traffic engineering opportunities you have when you have centralized control. The disaggregated ROADM project, and the goal to get ROADMs to be able to interoperate more effectively. Being able to easily fit into an existing internet infrastructure through SDN IP peering. And through that, we run today global deployment and research and education networks. The most interesting use case started as CORD in the residential area and became its own platform. And CORD as a platform allows you to use commodity access devices in a data center type architecture where you have commodity servers, you have VNFs running on those servers. Those VNFs are interconnected through a data center fabric, one that's called Trellis. The underlay and overlay networks are controlled through ONOS. And the VNFs are orchestrated through another piece of open source software called XOS, which stands for Everything as a Service Operating System. Although this started as a residential use case for AT&T, this is a general solution and a general architecture. And since we started in residential, we've also moved into the mobile space, which has been pushed by SK Telecom, Verizon, and AT&T, as well as the enterprise space. The only thing that's different is a different set of access devices that have been disaggregated, and a different set of VNFs that you're orchestrating. In addition to our partners, we work with many other service providers around the globe. Again, the emphasis being, how do we bring you out to a field trial and then into production? And I've talked a lot about service providers and telcos, but this model also applies to enterprises. And in that vein, we identify a few leading enterprises like Google, Microsoft, and so forth. We work with them on their use cases and their DevOps model. And again, we work on a path from showing a proof of concept out into production. Working with them, we define a partnership with a vendor community. And that, of course, is easier once we have active engagement of a few large enterprises. And you may have seen that we already have a couple of open source projects in this space, one called Faucet and another called Enterprise Atrium. Let's talk a little bit about software-defined standards. This is a hotly debated topic because networking is undergoing a big change right now from where standards started in a set of organizations, and now standards are going to be done a little bit differently with so much software. Are there examples that have been successful? And I'm old enough to remember one that was. The IETF was very effective. And this was their motto. We reject King's precedents of voting. We believe in rough consensus and running code. And through an iterative process, the IETF took running code and ideas for protocol standards and iterated those. And that's how we ended up with the internet that we have today. But unfortunately, like any organization that grows over so many years, it's hard to keep that same spirit, especially as the world changes. And my personal feeling is that the IETF has too many existing directions, and it's going to be hard to turn that ship. Right? So there has to be somebody else that will help provide the same type of environment that the IETF provided early on in the internet days. So here's how a little bit more information on the project setup that we have. So we have two platforms that are Linux Foundation projects. We have a number of sub-projects that have been approved by their technical steering teams. We also have an ecosystem where it's easy for you to create projects which align well with these initiatives. So there's a project incubator that any ONF member, or really anybody in the open source community, can contribute to. And standards work across those set of activities. It's important. We're the ones, we influence the platforms that we have, right? So we're influencing core, but there are other very important open source projects out there, like ODL, like OPNFV, and we'll work closely with them. And we'll continue to work with the standards organizations, Broadband Forum and Metro Ethernet Forum. So people ask me, where do you start? Do you first write the standard? Do you first write the code? I say, don't worry about it, right? Get started. That's the important thing, right? And so you come into this process with some ideas in a document, or you come into the code, but then you start working and iterating on that and getting it to work for customers. And along the way, something happens, right? You identify important program interfaces. You figure out what the data lines are. and those turn into standards. And there's many opportunities for active collaboration in open source as well as standards. And working on the consensus building and the generalizations of these is a great opportunity, so I encourage everybody to get involved. And again, which one comes first? Don't worry about it. The key is get started and start collaborating. How do we define our success? First and foremost, it's through real production, right? And that starts with proof of concepts and movement into lab and field trials, and then out to our networks. Having a rich and diverse set of services, having quality in our platforms and solutions, through features and scalability, high availability, and performance. These have been some of the tenets of ONOS from the beginning. And maybe most important is the community health, right, which is all of you. Right? So do we have a good-sized community around it? Is it a diverse community? Mark brought up a lot of these really good points, right? Are people staying in communities? Is there good retention? And are they making contributions? And of course, there's many challenges. There's way too many open source projects, in my opinion, and there's probably going to be more. And there's a lot happening with disaggregation and networking, a lot of confusion and uncertainty, and there's a lot of talk about the companies and developers can't decide where to invest, which project to get involved in. But there is collaboration, and software-defined standards are going to require changes to how both of those communities work. And from my perspective, the new ONF will build platform solution standards with deep engagement of the operators and commitment to bringing the software out to trials and deployments. And we believe that through this active process, we will bring clarity out of that confusion and uncertainty. We'll have a clear path to impact for both open source as well as standards professionals. ONF has quite a good value proposition, whether you're a service provider or an enterprise or a vendor, or whether you're developers and standards professionals. And you can look at the ONF as being an anchor point for your engagement with the open source and standards communities to navigate through the exciting but confusing and uncertain world of disaggregation, softwareization, and open source. Final takeaway, the ONF and ON.Lab and their ecosystems have been contributing to the success of SDN and NFE for the last 10 years. With the new ONF, our members are going to have even greater opportunities to accelerate and increase the adoption of SDN and NFE, enabling the network operators to transform their networks into an agile platform for service delivery. Thank you very much for your attention.